Hello guys, welcome back to the channel. Slightly different video than I was hoping to put out today. If you're watching this, you'll also notice that most of the Falconry videos go out live, or rather they go out originally on a Friday. Hopefully it's at least Saturday when you're watching this and not any later. The original video planned has other contributors that have more knowledge than I on the subject. It's a Harris's Hawk video. It's going to be something very different. The input from the other guys, so we've got Kyle, we've got Tommy, and we've got well-known falconer, also David Rampling, contributing to that video. Went on a bit long. I've got so much editing and cutting to do, so it's going to hopefully be with you next week. But for this week, recent turns of events have made me look at some things that often don't get talked about, and certainly in my falconry career were irrelevant. Absolutely irrelevant until maybe 10, 15 or 20 years ago. But the last 10 years, problems have occurred with a particular group of two wild animals. They deserve to be there. It's their rightful place. But animals, predators that are causing falconers problems that would have been a pipe dream when I started falconry many years ago. Enjoy the rest of the video and we'll get into it in just a second. I need a cuppa first. So if you've been subscribed to this channel any time over the last sort of 12 months, I think you'll have noticed I'm hardly the sharpest dressed kind of guy, and that's because I'm not filming this in a studio. My life isn't YouTube, and I'm not filming stuff to make a YouTube channel to make money from stuff I've researched. And there's an awful lot of YouTubers I've noticed do that. They kind of just spout secondhand knowledge that they've read, which is kind of great if the original writing, especially if it's on social media, is correct, but not so great when you're just parrot fashion reciting other people's rubbish, if you like. So I'm usually working when I'm filming these. I've just stopped right now. I'm going to have a cup of tea. It's made, it's down there. I'm going to stop and drink it in a minute because I'm gasping. All that aside, I hope you can put up with my ugly mug and my scruffiness. Recent events. If you've been carrying on the channel, you've been watching, you've been keeping it, you'll know my golden eagle Zeus has recently pulled off a talon sheath. Luckily the quick or the bone underneath is still there. It should grow back okay. We will have to wait and see. It's put him out of action for a few weeks or the rest of the season. I'll determine that as the talon starts to regrow or not. Now, something else has happened recently, and that's Kyle has lost his best ferret. Now, I can tell you now, in the world of falconry and ferreting, a lot of ferrets are treated as just a tool in the toolbox. They're given little respect, to be quite honest. In fact, most ferrets spend most of their life, certainly through the summer, cooped up in very tiny enclosures. I've done it, you probably do it. They are incredibly intelligent. If you see our polecats here at Occurrence Falconry, these are pure polecats, wild type, not working ferrets. They have a really large enclosure. They use every bit of it. They're super clever. They're super energetic, just like your ferrets would be if they had a 12x12 enclosure to live in. But that's just a fact of life. Ferrets are very often treated as a secondary thing to help you as a falconer or a way of getting rabbits. People leave ferrets out when they can't be bothered to dig them out. I know people that have killed ferrets because they're not good workers. They breed overly readily in captivity, and so they have very little financial value, and often people treat them as such, and that's a shame. That's not everyone. I know a lot of people that love their ferrets as much as they love their dogs. Maybe not quite that much, but certainly right up there. And Kyle recently has lost a ferret, as in he's lost its life whilst out working for Alan, Tommy's male Harris Hawk. How did this happen? I'm going to come to that in a second. It's a thing that's becoming massively common, and it's now going to start impacting us all. I've had run-ins with this animal. Emily at the Falconry Centre and her dad, they've had run-ins with this species of animal. This is the second time this season, once in Northamptonshire, once in Yorkshire, that Kyle and Tommy have had run-ins with this species of animal. This is an animal that was extinct in England when I was a young falconer. Pretty much, you would never have seen one sort of 30 years ago. No way. In fact, at one point, there was just a few left in parts of Wales. Another problem that I could never believe would impact falconers in the UK when I was younger is wild birds of prey impacting, fighting with, trying to rob, and even killing directly or indirectly our birds. The title is Falcons and Ferrets, but it isn't just falcons. Most average size raptors are being killed. No, they're not. Most of them aren't being killed. Most of them can be the target of these wild raptors. Two species of raptor in particular. Now, the red kite, where I live, there are hundreds. We counted 35 in one place on the estate recently. They don't have a great impact on our falconry birds. Red kites are very, very nervous. They'll follow you all day long. As a human, they're looking out for you, leaving scraps of food. If you're flying other birds, it makes a kill. They'll hang around to pick up scraps like they do in the wild. They're quite a big bird. They can have over a 5-foot wingspan. Body mass, it's not very big at all, and its feet are wimpy. They're nervous to come down and land on the ground, so they don't really impact our falconry birds other than sometimes harrying them in the sky, mobbing them if you like. But often, with red kites, unless you're near their nesting ground, their nesting tree, they don't very often press home and attack. Not very often. Other two species were number one, sparrowhawks, especially the spars, the female. They actually impact on small micro falconry birds. I've never had it happen. I've flown male American kestrels, which are diminutive indeed. And the biggest fear, certainly here, and I would say countrywide now, is female sparrowhawks. I know people that have had their male American kestrels taken from a tree whilst out flying, transmitter and all. They've lost their bird, it's been killed by a spar, carried off, and then they've had to track to get their transmitter back if they can. What a sad state of affairs. You're picking up your technology, your bird's been killed and eaten by a wild bird. There's nothing wrong with this other than it's killing your bird and it's awful for you. But there's nothing wrong with it in so much as the sparrowhawk should or shouldn't be there. As falconers, we should be backing wild raptors all the way. But how do you stop that? It's really difficult, because if you've got a tiny micro raptor that's flown up a tree, a dashing spar as it dashes by, can take it out of the air, take it with you. You can be vigilant as you like, but it's always a risk. For most falconers, it's not a huge risk, because at the end of the day, most of us don't fly tiny micro raptors anyway. The number one bird of prey that's causing grief to falconry is the common buzzard. Where I live, there's as many common buzzards as there are red kites. Some counties you seem to get only red kites or only buzzards, or very heavy on one or the other. In Northamptonshire, there's thousands of red kites and thousands of common buzzards. Common buzzards are far more bolshy than a red kite. They've got sturdier feet, and whilst most of the time they're not trying to kill your falcon or your goshawk or your Harris hawk on the ground with its kill, they're trying to rob it. Imagine a scenario. Your well-manned falconry bird takes something on the ground. Maybe your falcon's caught a bird, maybe your male Harris hawk or your goshawk has caught a partridge or a hen pheasant, let's just say, on the ground. In the winter, that buzzard in a bad winter can be incredibly hungry, soaring above, even out of sight for you on a clear day. It sees your bird on the ground. Your bird just sits in the open. It's not dragging it or carrying it, because it's a tame-ish and well-manned falconry bird. Buzzards will come out of the air and they will try, really, most of the time they're trying to rob your bird of its kill. If the bird's mantling well, the buzzard can't see what it is your bird has got, but the fact it's seen it and noticed it mantling, if it's hungry enough, it's worth the investigation. And they'll often come down hard. As I say, they're often not attacking your bird directly. They're starving into the point they're risking a fight. But when they start crabbing and locking and footing each other, even your bird might come away perfectly fine. You've run ahead, the buzzard's scared away. Unfortunately, those wounds your bird has sustained that you cannot see under its feathers will go septic, or can go septic. And people are now losing birds due to buzzard strikes. In Scotland, people are even having issues with golden eagles, but around for most of us, it's the common buzzard. Now, when I was young, in my early 20s, I used to read a Falconry magazine, and there'd be occasional articles from falconers in the US. And some of those guys were flying falcons on prairie land, sage land, and they were running salukis or saluki crosses, sight hounds, which would watch the flight of the falcon, and they would keep up, and they were trained to just lay down next to the falcon as it fed on its kill to stop red-tailed hawks, golden eagles, and even coyotes from rushing in to rob the falcon and eating it as well. And I used to think, that's crazy. There's so many wild birds of prey there that they're having to think of a way to save their falcons from being killed by wild birds of prey. And I thought, wow, fancy living somewhere where birds of prey are that numerous. 30 years later, we do in the UK. I would never believed it possible. Sparrowhawks are a garden bird, literally, even in towns and cities. Peregrine falcons live in towns and cities. Goshawks are way commoner than the RSPB would lead you to believe. And buzzards and kites, for much of the country, the sky is full of them. You've got to think of ways around this. You've got to mitigate telemetry. GPS can probably be a little bit quicker. Telemetry, get to those birds fast, especially if they're game hawks or falcons taking game a long way off. I never thought it'd be possible, but it's something we all need to think about. And it's not just while we're flying. People are losing birds to buzzard strikes whilst weathering at home on their weathering lawn. Now, if you're not there for most of the day and your bird is weathering on a weathering lawn, you probably want to start looking on Google rather. There's some ultra cheap, lightweight steel and wire mesh enclosures, and they are really, really inexpensive. It's getting to the point you probably ought to be covering your weathering lawn unless you're really around there all day. The Falconry Centre, remember now, we've got most of our birds in free lofts, but there's always people around, and I can tell you now, we have so many birds of prey in and out and above the Falconry Centre wild all the time. Definitely a problem. When you see an 8.5 pound American bald eagle soaring at a couple of 100 feet in the late spring, and you see a buzzard weighing probably less than 2 pounds, take that bird out the sky like it's been hit by a shotgun and knock it down, tumbling down like it's been hit on one side by a shotgun. That's a buzzard protecting its nest. But you see the impact that can have on a big eagle and the impact it can have on that eagle's brain, fear of going up in the air. You can see how a starving buzzard is more than capable of locking talons with your falconry bird, even though your falconry bird has a lot of hunting prowess. On the ground feeding, it's lost that element of surprise and it's not exactly at its best. Things to think about. I'm going to move on to what really has happened recently. Back to the ferret in front. Cup of tea first. This one affects pretty much anyone rabbit hawking, because most rabbit hawkers today, most of us don't get very far without the help and application of the humble ferret. Those guys make all the difference. In fact, for most of us, making a good rabbit hawk is going to be very, very difficult without the help of the ferret as a companion. We know, or hopefully you know, that any bird of prey within reason, no matter how big, will soon learn that a ferret, whilst probably a juicy edible morsel, is best left alone because it provides tastier game and it's an ally not to be viewed as food. If you condition your hawk right, you do your falconry right, you've got enough game, the hawk will soon learn even something as short on brain cells as a goshawk. Oh, I can feel some anger. You know what I mean? Something living on its wits and not thinking for the sake of thinking as much as a goshawk will certainly learn that a ferret's an ally not to be eaten. Going back, I'm going to say, goodness me, 15 years, possibly longer, I trapped a polecat, a wild polecat. Now, polecats had started turning up on the roads local to me where I was living in Northamptonshire at the time, in a village in the countryside, but with a main road running through. Polecats in the area were starting to become frequent road casualties. One day, I had a run-in with a live one. I was ferreting for a hawk, for Eric the goshawk, and I heard a commotion down a hole. Now, it was one of those sort of holes that you could look down vertically, like a drop hole, and the commotion was right there. So I knelt down and listened. I saw my ferret's fur. I thought, well, I don't know what's going on. I reached down to grab her, and it wasn't her, or rather, it wasn't him, because I was working hobs at the time. Just as I reached my hand in the hole, this thing popped its head up and looked at me. I thought, whoa, someone else's ferret's down a hole. Someone's abandoned the ferret, or they've lost the ferret. The commotion continued back and forth, and then as my ferret became visible, I picked the old boy out, boxed him up. I returned later that evening with a live catch rabbit trap. I baited it with a rabbit leg wide at the back of the trap. I covered it in a black plastic sack garden bag, so it was dark and snug in there, and I staked it down outside the warren. First time lucky, checked it early the next morning, and in there was the ferret. Now I'm thinking I'll trap this ferret and put a thing on the local rag. Has anyone lost a ferret? But I thought, at least I'm doing the ferret a favour, and I'm hopefully going to get it back to its owner. It wasn't a ferret, it was a polecat. Now it did what I'd heard polecats do. It went ballistic when I took the bag off, because the poor thing was cornered, and my God, did it musk. It stank. I managed, which I was quite worried about, even with gloves on, I managed to undo the front of the trap. I let the guy go, and down the hole he went. Wild polecat. I'm trying to think exactly how long it was. I'm going to say it was about 15 years ago. So they were turning up dead on the road, and I'd actually encountered one whilst ferreting. These things have spread out. They've been released, and they've also spread out from Wales. These guys are now all over the UK, and in many parts they are thriving. Now, many populations will have domestic ferret genes in, where they've crossbred with escaped and feral ferrets, but at the end of the day, they're polecats, or they're unpure genetically polecats, but for all intents of wild purposes, they're polecats. They're doing what polecats do. They're part of the wild natural history and fauna of the UK once again. They feed heavily on rabbits. Luckily now for a lot of the UK, the rabbit population is bouncing back from VHD, from an absolute low ebb to almost hardly any in Northamptonshire, to really good numbers. And of course, if you eat rabbits, you're a ferret shaped on mustelid. Those rabbit holes make perfect places to live as well, and hide and hole up for the day. You put your ferret down there, it's going to encounter a polecat. Now, pure polecats are loners. They are the wild ancestor of the domestic ferret. They are not like ferrets. They are incredible loners, incredibly territorial. You couldn't keep two hobs together in captivity. They would kill each other. Whereas with ferrets, you can grow a couple of hobs up, buzzards especially, and they'll be the best of friends. And I would say, if you're going to keep pet rats or you're going to keep ferrets, it's almost cruel to keep one on its own, because they're kind of social. Polecats, as similar as they are, they really aren't like that. So if your ferret goes underground, that's invading that polecat's territory if it's down there. I'm hoping I'm going to get some comments from this video. I want to know, I'm really interested to know, you guys that are rabbit hawking, have you encountered wild polecats while you're out working? Where are you in the country? Because here in Northamptonshire, the numbers are really growing. The boys this year, they were invited to hawk in Yorkshire. They had an encounter with a wild polecat whilst ferreting. Emily and her dad Keith at the Falconry Centre earlier this season, they were ferreting and they had an encounter with a wild polecat. No harm done. Recently, Kyle and Tommy were ferreting. Kyle's best ferret, now I don't just mean the best working ferret, this was a ferret Kyle really hand reared and worked with from a tiny age, and he absolutely loved her like a dog, and as he said, it's the best ferret he will ever have. And the working ferret not only has the job of working and bolting rabbits, it needs to be tractable, it needs to come out when it's cold, it needs to be a trained working animal to be at top of its game. This girl was superb. She was 4, I think she's actually 5 years old, and she went down a hole and got mullered by a wild polecat.
In puncture holes.
Ferret's just come out of the hole. Looks like a polecat or something down there underneath. It's really gone for her neck. She's a bit sorry for herself.
Oh, she's going to die, isn't she? Die, baby.
The ferret didn't surface. They thought it got a rabbit in a stop end. And then in peripheral vision, he noticed her crawl out of a nearby hole, literally using her front legs like someone on an action movie, crawling out from an exploded building or something. She dragged herself out and slumped down next to him, and literally like a car crash cat dragging itself home to its owners. He took her home. She was really cold and her neck was riddled with bite marks, puncture wounds, typical of a polecat. The trouble is, as you know, if you ferret, mustelids go for the back of the neck. These vertebrae here, they know, you think about it, a stoat can kill a big buck rabbit. Like a lion taking a wildebeest in Africa, mustelids, once they bite you here, or not you hopefully, they bite their prey here, they basically paralyse it. Her front legs just about moved. She was cold. Kyle took her home, warmed her up, but she soon passed away due to those injuries. The bite of a polecat is incomparable to a domestic ferret. You have to feel it to believe it. Their jaws are so much more powerful. Something to think about, guys. I really, really want your input on this. I really want to know, have you encountered wild polecats? Where are you in the country? Again, they deserve to be here. Those animals are a natural part of our ecosystem, but it's all stuff we've got to start thinking about while we're out working our birds and working our ferrets. There's wild animals now that predate, or even just territorial disputes will attack our working animals. Two species, the buzzard and the polecat in Northamptonshire, where I've always hawked, didn't exist just a couple of decades ago. Certainly didn't exist in any way to threaten our birds. Give us some input. I hope you've liked the video. It's a little bit different. It is a bit of waffle, but I hope it gets you thinking. It's got me thinking, and I really want to hear from you guys. Hopefully, the next falconry video, next week's video, will be something very different about Harris's hawks. If you're not interested in Harris's hawks, it's going to be worth a watch, because it's going to have an awful lot of information from people that know about this particular topic, which I'll tell you about when it comes out. Please do us a favour, click on subscribe, but above all else on this video, give us some feedback, guys. Tell me what you think. Thanks a lot.